I remember that moment very clearly, the moment I realized I had been living in an illusion for years. When Nick walked into the living room with his usual smugness, tossing his sunglasses onto the coffee table and crossing his arms over his chest, I knew right away he was about to brag about something. And just as I expected, within seconds, he stood there in a brand new suit, polished leather shoes, luggage adorned with luxury brand logos, and a cocky smirk on his face. "I bet you love this upgrade, huh?" Nick sneered, his voice dripping with pride. I couldn't help it. I burst into laughter, a sudden, uncontrollable laugh, not out of joy but out of the sheer irony of the situation. Nick frowned, irritation flashing across his face. "What's so funny?" he snapped. I shook my head, smiling slowly, locking eyes with him. "Oh, Nick. You have no idea what you've just done." My name is Sarah Miller, 36 years old, a cybersecurity expert. I had been married to Nick for 8 years. 8 years that I now realized I had wasted on a man who never deserved me. Nick always had a sweet tongue, always painting grand dreams, always talking about big plans he never actually followed through with. And me? I was the one making those plans happen, for us. I was the one earning the money, paying the bills, maintaining stability while Nick jumped from one idea to another, never producing anything but excuses. At first I chose to ignore the warning signs. I thought I just needed to trust him, to wait a little longer, and Nick would grow up. I convinced myself he was just searching for an opportunity, that one day he would finally succeed. But that day never came. Nick didn't just fail at his career, he failed at being a husband. Our conversations about money always ended with Nick complaining that I didn't support him enough. The credit card bills kept piling up, and I was always the one taking care of them while he spent on frivolous things. I once asked Nick when he planned to get a real job, and he merely scoffed. "I'm not the kind of guy who works a 9 to 5 like you, Sarah. I was meant for bigger things." And what were those bigger things, exactly? Fancy dinners he couldn't afford? Expensive clothes that I had to buy? Luxury trips he suggested but expected me to pay for? I stubbornly believed this was just a phase, that Nick would change. But then I realized a simple truth. He never wanted to change. And so I had to change. I didn't realize it immediately. It took me years to reach that conclusion. But today, as I watched Nick stand there, draped in luxury he clearly couldn't afford, wearing a mask of fake confidence, I knew things were about to change. I knew that this time, I would be the one leaving. I remember that night, vividly. A night like any other. Or at least that's what I thought. Nick had said he would stay up late to work on his computer. That wasn't unusual. He often spent hours scrolling through investment sites, business forums, or articles about getting rich without working hard. I had stopped paying attention to his empty boasts long ago. I just nodded, wished him good night, and went to bed. But this time, something was different. As a cybersecurity expert, I had a habit of checking my devices at home to ensure data security. My laptop was protected by multiple layers of security. No one could access it without permission. But the next morning when I sat at my desk, I noticed something was off. The keyboard had faint smudges, small details but enough to put me on alert. A sense of unease crept over me. I opened the activity log on my laptop, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Someone had accessed my bank account just hours after I had gone to bed. I clicked on the Recent Transactions tab. A long list of extravagant purchases appeared before my eyes. Nearly $200,000. Gone overnight. First-class flights to Rome. Luxury hotels. A Rolex watch. Designer clothes. I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. But it didn't take me long to piece things together. Nick. Of course it was him. But there was one thing Nick didn't know. The card he used wasn't my personal card. It was a dummy card, part of a fraud detection training program I managed at my company. This account was specifically designed to simulate fraudulent transactions, helping organizations detect and prevent scammers. Every transaction on this card wasn't just monitored, it was automatically reported to federal financial authorities. Nick hadn't just stolen my money, he had made himself the target of a federal investigation. I took a deep breath, feeling my anger shift into a strange sense of calm. I had forgiven his laziness, his empty promises, and his constant manipulation. But this time? No. I picked up my phone and called Chloe, my lawyer and best friend. "You won't believe what just happened." "Try me," Chloe chuckled. "If it's enough to make you call me this early in the morning, it must be big." I told her everything. When I got to the part where Nick stole information from my laptop and used the dummy card for luxury purchases, Chloe burst into laughter. Wait, hold on. You're telling me he stole from a fraud detection account?" "Exactly. Sarah, he just signed his own sentence." I closed my eyes, keeping my voice steady. "Chloe, what do we do?" Chloe didn't hesitate. "First, don't react. Let him think you don't know yet." "Have the banks flagged the transactions?" I checked the fraud detection system, and, unsurprisingly, an alert popped up. "Suspicious activity detected, investigation in progress." The system has already reported it to the financial authorities. If they haven't contacted me yet, it's only a matter of time. "Good," Chloe's voice turned sharp. "Now. We gather everything. Transaction logs, laptop access records, all the evidence. When you're ready, I'll help you take this to court." I nodded even though I knew she couldn't see me over the phone. "Thank you, Chloe, this time, I'm not letting Nick get away with it." Chloe let out a satisfied hum. "Finally, Sarah, you've put up with enough." I put my phone down and looked back at my computer screen. Everything Nick had spent, every luxury item he thought he could indulge in without consequence, had been recorded, reported, and soon, he would have to face the consequences of his actions. I closed my eyes, feeling my anger slowly give way to something else. Determination. Nick might think he got away with $200,000, but what he really did was walk straight into a trap. And this time, I wasn't going to save him. After calling Chloe, I began gathering evidence. I saved every transaction from the dummy account, captured all the fraud alerts sent by the system. It wasn't just digital footprints. I also had the login history from my laptop, proving that someone had accessed it in the middle of the night. Chloe wasted no time reaching out to someone who could help us handle this, Special Agent Mark Reynolds from the Financial Crimes Investigation Unit. When we spoke over the phone the next morning, his voice was calm, yet authoritative. "I've reviewed the data you sent. This isn't just simple theft, Sarah. With this amount of money, if we can prove he deliberately misused financial information, this could turn into a serious criminal case." I gripped my phone tighter. "So what's the next step?" "We need to monitor him a bit longer. If he continues using this card, every transaction will strengthen the case." "Can you stay in contact with him as usual? Don't let him suspect anything." I nodded. "All right, I'll do that." Hanging up, I exhaled deeply, staring at my phone screen. Every time Nick swiped the card to buy another luxury item, I received an alert. Every transaction was one step closer to the day he would have to pay the price. 3 days later, I received a text from Nick. "I'm in Rome. You should have come with me. This place is paradise." I stared at the message, feeling both amused and bitter. Did Nick really think I didn't know? I didn't reply. I didn't need to say anything. I just sat there, quietly tracking his every move. Luxury hotels, lavish dinners with expensive wine, high-end fashion boutiques. Nick was living the high life, completely oblivious that every item he bought was more evidence against him. A week later, Nick came home, smug as if he had conquered the world. I was sitting on the sofa when he walked in, tossing his bags onto the floor with a victorious grin. "Babe, what a trip, absolutely unforgettable." I looked up at him, my expression calm. "Really? Tell me all about it." Nick eagerly sat down across from me, launching into a long-winded monologue about the fancy restaurants, five-star hotels, and the expensive things he had bought. I didn't interrupt. I didn't react. I just sat there, listening. Every word he spoke was evidence. When he bragged about the Rolex he bought on Via Condotti. When he described the designer jacket he flaunted on Instagram. I recorded it all. Nick truly believed he had fooled me. Leaning back into the chair, he sighed in satisfaction. See, this just proves that sometimes, Sarah, you need to loosen up a bit. You're always so uptight about money. I smiled faintly. You're right, Nick. Sometimes, people have to pay for what they wear. He didn't catch the meaning behind my words. But I knew it wouldn't be long before he understood it completely. That evening, I sat on the sofa, sipping a glass of wine while Nick lounged across from me, scrolling through his phone with a self-satisfied smirk. He still believed he had pulled off the perfect scheme, completely unaware that his lavish lifestyle had been nothing more than a trap I had set. My phone buzzed. A message from Chloe. They're on their way. I set my wineglass down, stood up slowly and walked toward the window. Outside, red and blue lights flashed in the darkness. 2 police cars had pulled up in front of the house. A faint smile crossed my lips. Sarah, what are you doing? Nick raised an eyebrow, noticing my unusual silence as I stood by the window. I didn't answer, I simply watched as 3 men stepped out of the vehicles. Special Agent Mark Reynolds, along with 2 uniformed officers. They walked up the steps. A firm knock echoed through the house. Nick frowned. Are you expecting someone? I turned around, crossing my arms over my chest, meeting his gaze with calm indifference. You should answer the door yourself, Nick. They're not here for me. Nick chuckled in confusion, but I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. He stood up and walked toward the door, but the moment he opened it and saw the 3 men standing there, his smile vanished. Nick Carter? Reynolds' deep, steady voice cut through the tension. Nick hesitated. Yeah, that's me. What's this about? We have a warrant for your arrest on charges related to financial fraud and unauthorized use of credit card information. The air in the room grew unbearably heavy. Nick froze, his eyes darting between me and Reynolds. Wait. What? Reynolds coolly pulled a document from his jacket and held it up. This is a legal arrest warrant, based on the fraudulent transactions you've made over the past 2 weeks. We have substantial evidence against you. Nick shook his head, stepping back. No way, this is a mistake. Sarah, say something. I remained still, arms crossed, with no intention of helping him. Nick, I have nothing to say. I think you should explain it to them yourself. His expression darkened. You set me up. I simply smiled. I shrugged. You brought this on yourself, Nick. I simply chose not to intervene. Reynolds signaled to one of the officers, who stepped forward and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Wait, I can explain, Nick panicked, backing away toward the sofa. You spent over $200,000 using stolen credit card information, Reynolds said slowly and clearly. Every transaction was tracked. We have login records from your wife's laptop, confirming that you accessed her device to collect the data illegally. Nick turned to me, his eyes filled with desperation. Sarah, please. I didn't mean to. I thought I could make it up later. You know me? I looked him straight in the eye. No, Nick. I think this is the first time I truly know who you are. Reynolds nodded at the officer, and within seconds, the sharp click of the handcuffs echoed through the room, locking around Nick's wrists. No, stop, you can't do this, Nick thrashed, trying to break free, but it was useless. The officer recited his Miranda rights as they pulled him toward the door. Sarah, you can't do this to me, we're married, Nick shouted as they pushed him outside. I crossed my arms, tilting my head slightly, my tone cold and indifferent. Do you think being a husband gives you the right to steal from your wife? Nick glared at me. You're going to regret this, Sarah. I smiled lightly. No, Nick, I think I made the right choice. You're the one who will regret it. The door shut with a sharp click and silence filled the room. I stood there for a few moments, looking out the window as the police car pulled away, taking Nick, and everything he once prided himself on, away with it. It was over. 8 years of endurance, 8 years of lying to myself that Nick would change. 8 years of being used by a man who only cared about himself. Today, it all ended. I took a deep breath, picked up my wineglass, and took a slow sip, letting the warmth spread through me. A wave of relief washed over me. For the first time in years, I truly felt free. 3 days after Nick's arrest, I received a call from Chloe. "I have news, Sarah." Her voice carried a mix of excitement and professionalism. I smirked, gripping my phone. "Tell me. I'm dying to know how he's handling it." Chloe chuckled. "He's not handling it at all. Nick is falling apart. I just got an update from Agent Reynolds. He's trying to play the victim." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "He told the investigators that this was all a misunderstanding, that you gave him permission to use the credit card. He even claimed you had a secret agreement where you let him borrow money. Because you loved him." I let out a short, amused laugh, dripping with sarcasm. "Nick really is a great actor. Too bad no one's buying his performance this time." "Exactly." Chloe sighed. "Reynolds shut that lie down in under 5 minutes. They have all the transaction data, the login records from your laptop, and even the recordings of him bragging about the theft." When confronted with the evidence, he started stammering and then went completely silent. I could picture it perfectly. Nick sitting in the interrogation room, desperately trying to spin a story to save himself, only to be exposed by undeniable facts. "So, what's his plan now?" I asked, sipping my coffee. "He's trying to negotiate a plea deal," Chloe replied immediately. "He knows that if this goes to trial, he could face a harsher sentence. His lawyer is pushing for him to plead guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence, avoiding jail time but repaying every cent he stole, along with additional fines." "Does he even have the money to pay it back?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No, not even close." Chloe laughed. "His accounts are frozen. All the luxury purchases he made with the dummy card have been cancelled, and the bank has refunded every penny to you. As for him, he'll have to work off his debt. Community service for at least 5 years. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a profound sense of relief. So, in the end, he's left with nothing. Exactly, and there's one more thing. What's that? His mistress, Samantha, right? I raised an eyebrow. You have news about her? Chloe chuckled. The moment she found out Nick was arrested for fraud, she disappeared. He's been texting, calling, even emailing her, begging, but Samantha has blocked him on everything. I wasn't surprised. Samantha only cared about what Nick could provide. Money, fancy dinners, expensive gifts. The moment he had nothing left to offer, she had no reason to stick around. What about his friends? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Same thing, he built an image of being a successful man, but now that the truth is out, no one wants to be associated with him. He's lost everything: money, reputation, relationships. Now, he's just drowning in debt with no future ahead. I sat in silence for a moment, letting all the information sink in. I didn't feel sorry for Nick. I didn't feel regret. There was only a cold sense of satisfaction, knowing that he was finally paying the price for everything he had done. Is there anything else I need to do? I asked. No, everything has been taken care of. Legally, you're completely in the clear. The bank has documented everything. He'll face his consequences and you can move forward without him dragging you down anymore. I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in years. Thank you, Chloe, I mean it. Always, Sarah. I hung up and looked around my apartment. It was the same place, but it felt completely different. No trace of Nick. No more luxury items he had bought with my money. No more toxic energy lingering in the air. I stood up, poured myself another glass of wine, and stepped onto the balcony. Under the city lights, I took a deep breath. Freedom! Finally, I had it. The divorce papers lay on the table before me, a thin sheet of paper that carried more weight than anything else in the past 8 years. I picked up the pen, inhaled deeply, and signed my name on the final line. It was over. My marriage to Nick Carter was now just a part of the past. My lawyer Chloe smiled as she glanced at the signed document. Congratulations, Sarah. You're officially free from him. I set the pen down, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Thank you, Chloe. I don't know how long it would have taken me to get here without you. You don't owe me anything, Sarah. You did this yourself. I just made it official. I chuckled softly, then picked up my coffee, swirling the cup between my fingers. Now, I think I'll finally do what I should have done a long time ago. And what's that? Chloe raised an eyebrow, curious. I looked around my apartment, now entirely mine, with no trace of Nick left behind. Enjoy my own life. In the weeks that followed, I poured all my energy into transforming my apartment into a new space, a place that was truly mine. I threw out everything Nick had bought with my money, the things he once flaunted as if they were his achievements. I changed the bedsheets, swapped out the curtains, and even painted the walls a deep blue, my favorite color, which Nick had always dismissed as too gloomy. I bought a new sofa, a dining set I had wanted for years but kept putting off because Nick insisted on saving money, only to waste it on pointless luxuries instead. For the first time in 8 years, I made every decision exactly the way I wanted, without having to ask anyone's opinion. And that feeling was incredible. 3 months after finalizing the divorce, I booked a trip. Not because someone invited me. Because I wanted to go. After years of carrying the weight of an incompetent husband, draining my finances, and sacrificing my time just to keep the family afloat, I no longer had to work for anyone else. This time, I was doing it for myself. I chose a peaceful coastal town, staying in a small bungalow with a porch facing the ocean. I spent an entire week walking along the beach, reading by the shore with a cocktail in hand, and simply enjoying the fresh air of freedom. No phone calls from Nick. No stress over bills. No pointless arguments about money. Just me and peace. One evening, as I sat on the beach watching the sunset, my phone vibrated. A new email popped up on the screen. Sender Nick Carter. I stared at the name for a few seconds. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately. But another part of me was curious. I opened the email. Sarah, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I truly apologize. I never meant to hurt you. I was wrong. I've lost everything. And now, I realize that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. Please, give me a chance to make it up to you. I didn't read any further. I laughed, a quiet chuckle filled with nothing but contempt. Nick wasn't sorry for what he had done. He was sorry for the consequences he had to face. I deleted the email without replying. Returning home from my trip, I felt completely different. I no longer thought about Nick every day. I no longer woke up with anxiety over finances or the debts he had left behind. I focused on my career, securing a higher position in my company with a salary that ensured I never had to worry about money again. I spent more time with my friends, the ones I had unintentionally neglected while trying to keep my marriage with Nick from falling apart. I went out for dinner, watched movies, and took long walks in the park, without anyone complaining that I was wasting time. One evening, Chloe stopped by with a bottle of wine. We sat on my balcony, looking out at the city lights. So, Chloe smiled. How do you feel now that Nick is gone? I thought for a moment, then smiled. Like taking off a jacket that's been too tight for 8 years. Chloe laughed. That's a good analogy. I lifted my wine glass, watching the deep red liquid shimmer under the lights. So, what should we toast to? Chloe asked. I glanced at her, then turned my gaze toward the vast night sky. To freedom. We clinked our glasses, and at that moment, I knew this was truly the beginning of my new life. Sarah's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, leaving isn't failure, it's victory. She spent 8 years fighting for a marriage, only to realize she was being used and unappreciated. But the moment she stood up for herself, demanded justice, and walked away from a selfish man, she didn't just escape. She found herself. In real life, many people stay in toxic relationships out of fear of change. But the truth is, freedom and happiness are always worth fighting for. What are your thoughts on Sarah's story? Have you ever met someone like Nick, or experienced a similar situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more real-life stories about family, relationships, and the lessons that come with them.